Just getting set up. This is the, as most of you already know, and those of you who don't know, this is the prelude to the show, and which goes live at 4:26, 4 minutes and 26 minutes, 4 minutes and 26 seconds after the top of the hour. And so I got to get our all our buttons pushed tonight. I've got the recording going, and then I have to go over. The reason I was so off last night, I realized I was late, and I got flustered, and I didn't get all my buttons pushed. There we go. We got Rainey said she'd push my button. Are you an innie or an outie? Oh, we're talking belly buttons, Ro. What do you know? All right. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Dave Potter. Uncle Dave is here. Better known to everybody here as Uncle Dave. Matthew Sainsbury, good to see you from Barbados, sir. Well, hi. How are you? Ellery's here with an orange in her mouth. You just like the cooked pig. Let's see. Hey, Paige, how you doing? Good to see you. And Philip Blair is in here. How you doing, Philip Blair? At least you were. 7:30, it said, p.m. That was an hour and a half ago. Hope you make it back. Grumpy Stack is here somewhere. Leslie Holker, good to see you. It's now 9:02 and 12 seconds, so we've got about 2 minutes.
Hi, Uncle Dave.
There you go. Hi, Uncle Dave. Hey, Field Guy. It's Small Human. Field Guy says, hi, Small Human. So they're all trying on their swimsuits for some swimming thing tomorrow.
I'm an Ellery.
You don't have to yell.
I'm an Ellery, not a human.
Yeah, there it is. She's an Ellery, not a human. Just so you all know. And Roger Rabbit is here. Good to see you, Roger Rabbit. Romeldian, good to see you, brother.
Who's that?
Leslie Holker.
Hi.
She says, hey, Ellery. How about that?
Hi, Leslie.
Leslie Holker. There's Ro. All right, you're crowding me, kid.
You're crowding me? Dad.
Hey, Ro. I'm crowding you. Crowding your style. You going to do the show tonight? So, all right. What do we got? We got 325. No, it's 331. That's his Field Guy.
I know it's Field Guy, but what the...
Well, let's see. Let me get my glasses on. It says, okay, fine, Ellery, alien.
Hey!
Yeah. Okay, say your highs and your goodbyes, because I'm going to get started here in less than a minute. 3:54. Okay, bye. You got to go. I love you. Bye. All right, guys. Everybody get set. You know the drill. We'll go dark for a few seconds, and then the show will start. So, and here we go. I'm going to go dark.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program. This is Scotty Roberts. I'm your host of this, the Intrepid radio program, right here on the Odyssey radio station. That's Odyssey Radio, ODYSY radio.com. Go check them out. Check out all the lineup that's over there. And you know you can hear this show in replay tomorrow over on Odyssey Radio. You can also check it out on my Spreaker account. And for tonight, however, you can see the show right here on my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. You can listen to the audio over on the radio station at odysseyradio.com. And you can see the live stream also over on Facebook at the Facebook Odyssey Radio page. So go take a listen over there. You can join the chat room any place here. If you're over here in the YouTube channel, which is where I lurk most of the show, you can join the chat room over there. And you'll see that there are people gathering there already, fellow Intrepids, people who have been with this show since its inception. Most of you, I think, have been. And so I want to welcome all of you Intrepids over there. And also on the YouTube channel, this is my own personal stuff for this show. If you would like to subscribe to the channel, do that. And if you want to comment, if you want to call into the show when I put out the number for calling in, you can only do that if you're subscribed to the channel. Now, the reason I do that is we've had some trolls in the past. Trolls don't bother me none. But what does bother me is the fact that that they're there and they try to disrupt the show, and that disrupts it for you. And you can't do that. You can't call into the show unless you're subscribed. So go ahead and get subscribed if you want to be. I told everybody over there, Ellie, don't touch that. That's perfect. It's set the way it's supposed to be. Thank you for walking by and randomly just screwing around with it. That's my children in the wings. And, kids, don't touch that. What's this? Beep, beep. Hey, Barbie D, good to see you over in the chat room. And so what I was saying was, if you're in the YouTube channel, just down below the window, you'll see a little button that says join somewhere down there. If you want to join the channel, you can do that. You can click that and see what that's all about. And one of these days, we'll talk some more about that. And I'll do one personal ad for myself. You all know about The Sword in the Clay, my book. That's my new book, The Sword in the Clay. I wrote it and illustrated it. And most of you know what the story is about. It's a ghostly tale. It's a tale of a true story at the same time, set in World War I, but also set 2,000 years ago during the Gallic Wars of Caesar. And so you'll find it interesting if you like that kind of stuff. And it's illustrated. And it's short. It was meant to be kind of a kid's book or a short young adult's book, 32 pages, something like that. It ended up being about 80 pages in length, about 8,000 words. And to give you an idea, your typical book, like say Tam O'Hare here in its original form. This is one of the original ones. This came out. This was about 30,000 words. So 8,000 words, and then 60 to 80,000 words is about the length of an average novel. So that gives you an idea. But bottom line, if you'd like to obtain a copy of that, go on over to theswordintheclay.com. That easy. Theswordintheclay.com. It's just the full title of the book with the word "the" at the beginning. Theswordintheclay.com. And get your copy. It's going to be roughly 4 to 6 weeks before we see that book in our hands. We might get a few pre-copies of that. We'll see how that goes. Maybe halfway through. So there you go. Thank you in advance. And thank you for those of you who didn't. Oh, thank you. A lovely wife. Come in and say hi real quick since you're here. Oh, she's got makeup all over her face. So, yeah, she delivered my Captain Kirk drink tonight. I think it's just water. Tasty. All right, folks. Last night we started talking about a topic that I think is kind of a fun topic. We all here seem to like books. We like to read them. We like to read to our kids. And there is something that I started looking at. I had read an article a long time ago about why horror is good for kids, why it's good to write horror. Now, I'm not talking, have your kids sit down with for a lovely meal and watching the Saw movies together. I don't consider Saw to be horror. I consider that to be it's kind of blood porn, so to speak. But horror, genuine horror, genuinely scary stories, things that scare us. Our kids need that, and there's a reason for it. And it really was, it came to the fore when I was in one of these author groups for kids. And everybody was talking about, oh, what should I write my new book about? I want to write a book about another cause. Now, I'm only mocking it because of the way I got to have a cause to write about. Oh, it's got to be leukemia or kids dealing with you pooping their pants or peeing the bed or kids having a problem with, oh, my Uncle Dave died. Sorry, Uncle Dave. That was the first name that came to mind. That's not prophetic. My Uncle Bob died. And how do I cope with it? I'm being bullied at school. Oh, this and that. And they're all looking for causes to write about. Nothing wrong with those things. But every new kids book I was seeing coming out in these groups had something to do with, and mommy showed me how to not poop my pants. And so things like that. And it's like, so I said in the group discussion, I said, what about just writing a great story for kids? Write a story. It doesn't have to have always a moral lesson to the story. Morals come with good stories. What I mean by morals is moral lessons at the end. Those come with the good story. You don't have to develop the story to make the moral happen. You write a good story and the moral comes out in the story. And I said, what about horror? Kids need horror. Kids need scary stories. And what about those? And so we started talking about those. And that's really what I'm doing here now. Thanks, Matthew Sainsbury. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see my notes. Well, there's light. We got this new light in here. And it's you probably noticed it's always dark down here in the studio. It's dark in the daytime. And so we finally got some floodlights. There's only in this huge room 2 lights, one above me and one over there above Rainey's desk. And we checked them, and they only had spotlights in them, so they would just shine down. The rest of the room was dark. Now we put floodlights in it the other day. It's like whole room it's illuminated now. So it's a little bright, but we'll adjust things as we go. So what did I see? Some interesting comments, I thought, going by. Hey, Michelle Canham-Free over in the chat room. Matthew Sainsbury. That's true. Maybe after what I've been through, I could write stories that can speak to people. Maybe, Matthew. They say a good writer writes from what they know and what they experience. Now, do good science fiction writers, have they experienced traveling to other planets in different time periods? No. They've experienced the raw emotions that are underneath that. So there you go. Matthew Finn, Master Finn. Hey, now we love our Uncle Dave. Yeah. Sorry about that, Dave. That was unintentional. And hey, Niall from Ireland. Good to see you, brother. And so these are all the things that prompted me to want to write about this stuff. And things that there are things that scare kids. And sometimes it's very good for them to read good novels that scare them, to see good art that scares them. There's good reason behind this. And last night I started talking about some of the reasons that I had. And it was if I can speak, there were 5 different things. It wasn't 10, it was 5 different things that I had listed that are good reasons for teaching our kids about fear. And not, let me amend that. I'm mixing that up a little bit. I don't mean teaching them about fear. I mean writing good stories, presenting them stories. Why should we write good books and do art that revolve around things that scare kids? Because kids need that stuff. And we left off with reason number 6. I'm going to pick that up. Then I want to get into a little something else on the aside here. But reason 6 that we need to write good, scary stories for kids is that hidden inside horror are the facts of life. And we started talking about this one last night. And growing up is scary. It's painful for kids. It can be violent. Your body's doing weird things. And you might, to your own great horror, become something beastly and terrible on the other side of puberty. The Wolfman taught us this. Being weird can be lonely, and your parents never understand you, and the world is sometimes incomprehensible. Now we can write books about why do I have a zitty face? Or we can write stories about you create the horror cover for the story and let that teach things to kids. So the world's incomprehensible. That's kind of like Frankenstein's monster. And that showed us that. And sex and desire is creepy. It's intimate and dangerous and potentially threatening ways. And that's what Dracula said. And what was it that Frankenstein said out of Mary Shelley's? Something about, he says, something about being the angel and the Prometheus. When we watched the old Frankenstein black and white movies, and most of us have seen those, unless you're too young now and those things aren't in vogue to watch anymore. But Frankenstein, all he ever said was, and yet in the books, he was highly intelligent. He became highly intelligent. And he could say to his maker, you are God and I am the angel, or I am Prometheus. And I can't remember the exact quote from that. And so I think that is the things that we can teach in horror, are things like that. Mary Shelley, her whole horror story about Frankenstein was to be a picture of God and creation and the separation and so on and things like that. And many people didn't even know that. So whether it's the Hunger Games as a clear-cut metaphor for Darwinian hellscape of high school, or learning to turn and face a scary part of ourselves, or the dangers of the past via any of the billions of ghost stories around us, horror can serve as a thinly veiled reflection of ourselves in a way almost impossible to imagine in other forms. Horror can do this because, like sci-fi and fantasy, it has inherent within it a cloak of genre tropes that beg to be stripped off. And its treasures are never buried so deep that you can't find them with some mild digging. And it's a gift to us, made better by having to root around for it. And like all deep knowledge, we have to earn its boons rather than receive them. So guppy-mouthed, like babies on a bottle or birds in a nest. So fear isn't it's like I even mentioned last night, the book that I read a couple of kids' books here last week or a couple of weeks ago. We read The Ghost of Nicholas Grebe. Not a particularly scary story, not a deep moral lesson to The Ghost of Nicholas Grebe, but a neat old ghost story with great illustrations for kids. And it's about an old man who dies, and it's bitter cold outside in eastern United States back in the colonial period. They bury him in a shallow grave. Well, the dog goes out and digs up his leg bone, carries it off, and the dog gets into a carriage that's left open and standing while people are gazing at the moonlight. And and takes him to the sea wharf. He gets on a boat, a big whaling boat. The boat finds him and kicks him off the boat, puts him back on the wharf, and yet he's separated from the bone of Nicholas Grebe that he dug up. And this bone makes a journey of 100 years out to sea. But it's always the ghost of Nicholas Grebe haunts the old house. Forevermore I quest till all my bones together rust, is what he says in the book several times. And my kids loved that book, and they laughed at the scary parts. That book was not a horror story necessarily. It was a ghost story, and it was very spoon-fed ghost story, a very lighthearted one. Then you have Lemony Snicket's The Dark, which we read last week sometime, about the little boy Laszlo who's afraid of the dark. And the dark is, in a way, anthropomorphized. He speaks to and helps him find when his nightlight burns out in his room, the dark helps him find a spare bulb so he wouldn't have to be afraid. And the dark was personified in, he says, there was only one night that the dark ever visited Laszlo's room, and that was when the nightlight went out. And so interesting stuff like that for kids. And those are the things that we fear. And there's a great lesson in The Dark by Lemony Snicket about it's no need to be afraid of the dark, and here's why. And so fear isn't the best thing in the world, of course, but it's not going anywhere. And we're likely forced to meet it in some capacity, great or small, each and every day. I just want to make mention, because I know he's over there in the chat room, Niall does some amazing artwork. Some of it's very dark to look at, but there's something from within Niall that's being expressed in that. And so there's no way around it. Life is dark, and there's dark things we have to encounter. As I used to say an awful lot, life is really just a big, meaty piece of shit. And it's wrapped up in entropic decay if left to itself, unless you learn to cope. You learn to deal with it. All we have is the way to cope with what goes wrong, to cope with the decay and the entropic nature of life. And that's what good books will do for kids. So the more we ignore scary things, the bigger and scarier those things become. One of the great truths from Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune, and this is where we left off last night. One of the great truths from Herbert's perpetually important Dune series is the Bene Gesserit. They're the religious order, you could say, if you haven't read the books. The Bene Gesserit's litany against fear. And it says this: I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it is gone past, I will turn to see its path. Where the fear is gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. So in so many geeky ways, this kind of sums up the most important and primary element of fear. Not to pretend that it doesn't exist, or whether it should or should not, but to meet it face on, to hug it, to embrace it and let it go, so we may be better prepared for whatever else comes down the pike next. So crafting horror narratives for kids does require changing the way scary things are approached. But I'd argue that what tools we are required to take off the table for a younger audience aren't really important tools in telling those stories in the first place. Rape, gore, splatter, dismemberment for the enjoyment of some weird whack psycho. Those themes, I think, my opinion, terrible. Some of you might like them for entertainment. I have at times watched movies like that for entertainment, and it leaves me hollow. It doesn't do a damn thing for me. I said to Rainy once, we just watched a movie about how a guy could kill 19 people in the most grotesque ways possible. What was the moral of this story? Because the guy's still alive out there to do it again. And there is no moral to the story. It's fear porn. And so I don't like those kind of movies. I don't watch horror. Not because they gross me out and I can't figure out how the special effects are done and all that. Sometimes it's fascinating to figure out how things are done. CGI, things like that. But all of those things, rape and splatter themes and decapitation for the sake of decapitation, that's gross gore for the sake of gore. Those are poorly executed shortcuts for delivering weight and fear in a story, I think. And that's all they're there for, just to scare you. So losing them and being forced to employ more elegant and successful tools like mood, pacing, off-camera violence, the sorts of things you have to do to make scary stories for kids, make these tales more interesting and qualitative in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. And we're forced to think more creatively when we're denied the alluring tropes of the genre to lean on. We're more apt to reinvent the genre when we aren't burdened by the rules of all genres that lure us into all the genres that lure us into adopting. And with kids, one has to land on safer ground sooner than would be the case with the adults. But otherwise, what I do as a writer when I tell a scary part of a story, especially to kids, is essentially the same thing I would do to craft one for adults. There are certain themes that require life experience to understand as a reader as well. And a successful storyteller should know their audience. So don't be afraid to scare your kids or your kids' friends with scary books that you love. Obviously, you have to tailor things to your kids' individual levels. For example, films and books that I would let my 12-year-old digest, I won't let my younger girls digest or even get into. There's some things I won't let my 12-year-old get into until he's 14, 15, or 16. They're just different people. They're in different places in life, different levels of maturity. And so they can handle different levels of material. So they both love spooky stuff, but within their individual limits. Showing The Shining to an 8-year-old is generally a poor idea. Although The Shining, to most of us adults, it's creepy. It's psychologically creepy. Imagine what that is to an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old. Not the same thing. And so my advice is when there's doubt, leave it out. You can't make anyone unsee what you show them. Think back yourselves to the first time you saw the scariest thing you've ever seen on film. Now, you might now, as an adult, go, that was nothing. Go back to when you were 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, and the time when you first saw that and what that did to you. Many of us might look at the movie like The Exorcist, the original Exorcist. And nowadays we go, oh, that's creepy. And sometimes psychologically creepy with it. But imagine that for a kid who's not old enough to consume that. Sometimes that stuff is not, there are some things you got to avoid. And when you're in doubt, leave it out, is my policy. So you can't make anyone unsee what you've shown them. And I guarantee you even had things, if you think back to it, that's the thing that scared me when I was a kid. And it will still scare you. And so we think back to those things. They come up psychologically for us. So I would also remember what it was felt like to wake up with a twisty-headed nightmares after The Exorcist. I'm sorry, The Exorcist. And so, not the Exodus, totally different movie. And you know the difference, and you don't cross the streams, or it'll be totally backfired on you. But if you navigate it right, it can be a completely positive and powerful experience. So the idea is, with books for our kids, get out there, find things, or write things that scare some kids today. Do it right away, and they'll thank you when they're older. There's going to be a lot of adults who find this whole thing terrible and offensive, this idea of scaring children, even as their kids cry for the material. And I would have to remind you or them that children are often smarter than the adults they wind up becoming. Get that? Children are often smarter than the adults that they wind up becoming. And the parents that find this so inappropriate are under the illusion that if they don't ever let their kids know any of this stuff, they won't have bad dreams, or they won't be afraid ever. You won't be afraid. I won't let you see anything that will make you afraid. Not knowing that tragically they're just making them more vulnerable to fear later on. Let the kids follow their interests, but be a good guardian of that. Guardianship over your kids rather than an oppressive guard. And only adults are under the delusion that childhood is a fairy rainbow fantasy land. Just let your kids lead on what they love and you'll be fine. So, and you know what? That's just kind of the way it is. That's the way I see stories and evil things that our kids can be used to guide them into learning about fear. So, bad dreams prepare us for dealing with the government, says Uncle Dave. How true is that, Uncle Dave? Over in the chat room. And Uncle Dave also says, it took me several days to watch The Shining when it first came out on cable. It touched a chord deep inside me, and I couldn't sit through it. That's little Stanley Kubrick for you. You know, it was actually a horror film, but I don't think was really supposed to be in the horror genre. Thinking of Stanley Kubrick, 2001, A Space Odyssey. Watch that sometime. That's a creepy film when you think about it. Barbie D says, I saw The Shining once and never again. Remeldian says, government, don't you mean mafia? Yeah, maybe so. Nowadays, with all the corruption going around in government. So I had mentioned early on, I mentioned in the intro graphic for this show, that thing of fear in the Bible. Sometimes I said, even the Bible is a very scary book when you think about it. We look at the Bible and we think it's this morally beautiful book, of course, and it has great religious teachings, especially if you're a Christian. The Old Testament, if you're Jewish, and that these things are things that we want our kids to read and emulate and memorize Bible verses and so on. Yet, did you know, and I got a bunch of stuff up here about fear in the Bible, the ridiculously scary stories from the Bible. Can you think of any off the top of your head? What would scare you? Many times we've taken the Bible and we've put all those stories into this mythological realm. And so the Bible stories become Bible myths. They're Jesus myths. They're bathrobes and bed sheets and beard myths, you know, and Moses turning his staff into a snake and consuming the Egyptian magicians' snakes that they made out of their staffs. What does that mean? And we look at them and go, ooh, that's great. And then it's become a biblical myth, a story that is not meant to scare you, but if you dug down into that, Imagine filming that scene the right way or writing about that. It could be a very scary story. The Bible's full of scary shit, especially for kids. Sometimes you got to watch what you let your kids read. We read about and we teach about, the little felt cutout characters just stick on a felt board for little kids Sunday school, kindergartners, of everything, every big story in the Bible. David and Goliath. Oh, here's David and he's fighting the giant and he kills him and he wins the day for God. But you don't dig into that story, the scariness of what that story could be written as, or as it is written. There's a scary theme underneath that. You look at the story of Noah and the ark. Same thing. We see play school toys of little plastic arcs, with these beautiful curved bows and all the animals, giraffes, lions, monkeys, this and that. And Noah, the little bobble-headed Noah, bearded, and with the white beard. He's always got a white beard. And so you got these animals. They're kids' toys and a kid's story. Yet the story of Noah and the ark was devastatingly cruel and dark. The preamble in the Bible that people don't even know is related to the story many times. We've talked about a million times on this show, the Nephilim. The account in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, is the preamble to the flood story. And it talks about, imagine teaching this as part of your little felt board story to kindergartners, or adding it to the play school collection. And that would be, and in those days, the sons of God, the celestial beings, came down and intermingled and had sex with the daughter of men and had children by them. And they loved them and they taught them these different things from the celestial heavens and so on. You look at that story and we don't teach that to our little kids. So there are fearful stories in the Bible. And I've got a few listed here of some of these things in the Bible. Nadab and Abihu buried alive. Did you ever hear about that story in the Bible? That's in Leviticus 10, 1 through 20. If you have any kids that have been caught playing with matches or a lighter, lay this fire story from the Bible on them. Nadab and Abihu are Moses' nephews. They're part of the royal family, so to speak, of early Israel. They're Moses' nephews. Their father, Aaron, he's the first high priest. Moses' brother is the big deal priest in the community and the only person who's supposed to make their sacrifices to God. And these decide they're good enough, Nadab and Abihu, to burn an offering and all by themselves. Now, this is part of the Hebrew mythology. And we know how God hates it when anyone in the Bible starts feeling too good about themselves. So God sends an all-consuming fire from heaven that engulfs these guys, fries them on the spot, and they're left charred where they stood. And any kid will get nervous when you just turn on the oven and hear that story. So burned alive, not buried. I think I said buried alive at the beginning. Burned alive. And so Nadab and Abihu, they thought they could give their own sacrifices to God. But God showed them, no, it's the high priest. She sends fire from heaven and consumes them into nothingness. They're a pile of ash on the ground. That's a scary story. And Niall Parkinson says, I think the war in heaven and the fall of the renegade angels is very scary. That is a scary story. But we've been able to take those out and we put them in this safe zone of telling this is God, or this is heaven, and this is on, and this is what went on, and we forget that there is a scary story there. Another one is John the Baptist being beheaded in Mark 4, 1 through 12. And there's no need for the story of Sleepy Hollow, because you've got the story of John the Baptist. Well, almost. He doesn't run around cutting off people's heads after he's beheaded. But King Herod had John the Baptist arrested. And while John's in jail, Herod throws this huge party. The entertainment is Herod's niece, some hot little hottie, dancing for all the guys. And she apparently does a great job because her creepy uncle promises her anything she wants, Herod the king. And there's a little history behind why she requests this. You can have anything. Ooh, Uncle Herod will give you anything you want. You just tell me what you want and I'll give it to you. Ooh, he's just a creepy old man. Dirty old man. And so she does this great job with her dancing because he's like, oh, daddy uncle will give you what you want. And of course, what does she want? The head of John the Baptist. And Herod doesn't want to look like an ass. And so he has John's head cut off, served on a huge platter in front of everyone. Those guests must have gone home thinking that party started so nice. There were hors d'oeuvres. There was a stuffed pig. There was wine. There was a great dancer, hottie dancer. Where did the evening go wrong? Where did they turn south on that one? And so, that's the story of what's going on there. Yeah, Leslie says King Herod was a prick. Yeah, he was. He really was. So, John the Baptist being beheaded. Not a pretty story, but it's part of the Jesus story in the New Testament. How about Lot and his wild daughters? Genesis 19:30 through 36. Bible's a scary thing. The story of Lot in the Bible is pretty freaky to begin with. Sodom and Gomorrah is ready to be destroyed. Lot wants to throw his daughters out of the house to some rapists as a distraction. And as he's getting out of town, his wife gets turned into a pillar of salt. And this isn't even the craziest part of the story. Once Lot and his daughters escape, they're hiding out in a cave. What happens? Do you remember this part of the story? After everything that took place, they're hiding in a cave. The daughters have no other men around, so they take turns getting jiggy with dad. They got him drunk. They had sex with him. And it's all okay because it's continuing his lineage. You could show your kids The Exorcist over and over again. It wouldn't freak them out as much as Lot's crazy family. And you remember that story too? I always wondered. The Bible talks about Lot being the only righteous man left in that city. And that's why God sent the angels to warn him and get him out of the city. Yet what happens when there's a mob that knows the two angels that are men they don't know, and the mob, it's like, hey, send them out here that we can have sex with them, that we can, this is the implication of the story. The town comes beating on Lot's door. Send those two men out. And Lot's like trying to protect the angels who are there to destroy the city. So number one, he's got something a little mixed up there. If they're there and they can destroy the city and they have powers, special powers, they don't need him protecting them from the raping men in the city. And so what does he do instead? He offers his two daughters to the rapacious crowd. And I remember asking the question early on, and Lot's the righteous guy in the city? I would never offer my daughters to a rapacious crowd to protect two guys with special powers. That seems awfully odd. And then, of course, they get him drunk and they have sex with him to continue his line. That's a horror story. What about the revenge poem in Psalm 137, 7 through 9? I'm debating whether I should take the time to read that, but not all the Psalms are like the very sweet, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Some are just brutal. There's a scary lullaby for kids. This psalm is talking about the children of God have been taken away from their home, conquered by Babylon. It's really some nice daydreaming about what the Israelites are going to do to get their revenge against the Babylonians. And it includes getting a hold of their newborn infant babies and smashing their still soft little skulls against the rocks, bashing their brains out of their heads until an entire generation is wiped out. So the children of God will not only destroy you in the present, they'll kill your future while they're at it. So this is one of the Psalms. So where they sit by the river in Babylon and hang their harps on the tree and weep for Jerusalem, and plot ways to wreak revenge on the Babylonians by smashing out the brains of their newborn infants against the rocks. So King Herod, how about King Herod? The worm fest with King Herod, Acts 12, 21 through 22. Just like in the movies, no bad guy in the Bible ever has a nice death. Bad guys always die some horrible, horrible death. Think of Nabal and David and Abigail, that whole scene. Nabal, he gets so pissed off when his wife helps David and his men that it says he has a stroke. He strokes out, falls on the ground, he's eaten by worms. Then you've got Herod, is another one of those guys. After he's challenged, he still refuses. He shows up and he's doing some public speaking, King Herod. After he's challenged, he still refuses to acknowledge the one true God. And big mistake in the Bible. Get ready for this, kids. King Herod is immediately struck down by God. He's not dead yet, but he wishes he was, because he has the slow, painful process of being eaten alive by worms for several days from the inside out. Smell had to be awful. Horror story in the book of Acts. Then you got the Levite, the concubine, and the really bad road trip. Sounds like a great movie. You remember the wife, the cook, the something in her lover that came out a long time ago. The Levite, the concubine, and the really bad road trip. This is in Judges 5:19. This is a Bible story that starts out like any bad horror film. And it's a couple decides to let's go spend the night in a strange place. Come on, honey. Let's go find a strange place and spend the night. A Levite from the tribe of Levi, the priestly tribe of Israel. A Levite was traveling home with his concubine, and they stay the night in the town of Gibeah. And this place is dangerous. It makes Detroit look like Epcot. They find a place to stay with an old man. Some horrible place. People show up looking for a good time and a good romp, sexual romp in the mud. And the old man and the Levite throw the girl out to them. They take the man's concubine and throw her out to the guys. And they could spend the night with her, raping her to death. The next morning, the Levite finds her dead outside the door. He wants revenge. He threw her to them, yet he wants revenge. Threw her to them to save his own life, yet he wants revenge for her death. She's his concubine, you know. So he gets it by chopping up her body. He cuts it up into 12 pieces and sends those off to the 12 tribes of Israel. So they attack Gibeah. So if you're looking for a great Halloween horror story, this has it all. Rape, murder, dismemberment, and war based on that dismemberment. So here it is. So there it is. Let me just recap that last story. You got the Levite, who's the priestly tribe of Israel, travels with his concubine, not his wife, his concubine. They find a place to stay with an old guy in Gibeah, and guys come knocking on the door. And like Lot, they throw the young girl out to the crowd. They rape her to death. And the man cuts her up into pieces, her body, sends it to the 12 tribes of Israel to provoke them to war with the Gibeonites. With Gibeah. Gibeonites, you can call them, I guess. What a story. This is in the Bible. That's in the book of Judges. Ezekiel and his zombie army. Remember that one? That's kind of a cool story. Ezekiel and his zombie army. Yeah, yep, people are brutal and corrupt, and the Bible reflects that, says Matt Finn. Go figure. Yeah, I agree, Matt Finn. I do agree. There is a theological way you can look at the stories in the Bible, and there's another way you can look at them as well when you apply. I'm not absent-minded to that stuff, brother. I see that stuff. I know the lessons that are being taught there. At the same time, these are not stories I would have my kids sit down and read unless they were crafted in such a way. Let's just put it this way. Those are stories kids are going to remember. So Ezekiel and his zombie army. Here's another one. This one's pretty cool. It doesn't have raping young women. It doesn't have old guys throwing women out to the crowd to save their own dicks. It's got this where the Bible's full of stories, by the way, of the dead coming back to life. And here's one of the scarier ones. God takes Ezekiel by the hand and drops him off in a valley filled with human bones. And Ezekiel is actually someone God likes. He's a prophet. God tells Ezekiel to give the command, and all of a sudden the bones start moving and slithering toward him. The only thing we have to compare it with today is to suddenly see a bunch of anorexic supermodels start walking around. And so the reattached bones all stand up, tendons and muscles start forming on them, and they rise up as a zombie army. And oddly enough, the Bible, they were the good guys, and they fought a battle. You remember the story of dem bones, gonna rise, dem bones, gonna rise, and so on. Niall says, war, rape, murder, dismemberment. What has changed? What lessons have been learned? Look around. Atheism carries the same message as belief. Yeah, it does. Nothing's any different than back then when these things were written. And so, Leslie Holker, good night, over in the chat room. She says, if you haven't already, go over and reserve your copy of The Sword in the Clay at theswordintheclay.com. Thank you, Leslie, for those parting words. Have a good night over in the chat room. For those of you just listening audibly over on the radio station, chat rooms full of the Intrepids talking up a storm. All right, so stories. I didn't even get to the second section. Maybe we'll do one more night of why kids need horror, why kids need spooky, scary stories. I think it's good for kids to have those things. Kids need those things. They need we, as their parents and their guardians, showing them what is a good story and what the lesson is to learn. And it's good to scare kids. Kids need to start forming those things in their imaginations. Now, I don't think kids need gore. I don't think they need murder porn for kids. I don't think that's necessary. But I think they need good stories to teach them lessons, something to learn from, crafted in ways that help them understand the lessons behind it and the lessons in life that come. Life is a nasty, dirty place. And I think that's maybe one of the morals of the Bible stories. Life is a nasty place. Sometimes, and it does bother me, that God seemed to be such a nasty God at times. The things that he asked them to do. Of course, there was supposed to be a theological reason when God said, I want you to wipe out the town, and I want you to wipe out every last person, every man, every woman, every child, every baby at the, what was the term he called it for breastfeeding babies? Babies at the breast, maybe. That was it. Every goat, every sheep, every dog were to be wiped out and put to the flame, the Bible says. Now, was there a good reason for doing this? Well, apparently God had his reasons for commanding this. But these are stories that you say, why did God do that? Didn't God want them converted to believe? Weren't they believers Didn't he want them to be believers in him? It's a strange story. These stories like this. Maybe those towns were genetic abominations. Maybe, Matt Finn. Maybe they were. What I stopped doing a long time ago is making excuses for God. Take God at face value. Supposedly, the Bible is supposed to be teaching us the right ways to live, the right things about God, the things of God, the holiness of God. And yet we find many times that those stories were pretty dark. We'll talk more about this stuff tomorrow. I'd like to get more of your feedback and your thoughts on this, Matt Finn. And we'll talk about this some more. So, folks, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for taking your time to come in and spend it with me. And on that note, we're out. Live long and prosper. 23-hour break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, there we are, folks. We survived another radio show. We are now in the afterglow of the radio show. We're no longer broadcasting on air. We're just over here on the chat room, both here and in Facebook. So you can go continue to watch us here. I don't know how long we'll go tonight. It's generally only a few minutes, half hour at the most. But there we are now disconnected from the network. And we've got the audio recording is all done. And how about that? We did everything the right way tonight, meaning without too many errors. So there you go. So how was everybody's day today? Hope you had a good day. Thank you for sticking around for the Captain's Cabin. Arr. And I'm just putting on my glasses so I can read your comments over in the chat room. Let's see. What do we got here? It goes way back. Iowa X says war porn is the new horror show. I was just checking the raw news on Telegram. Yeah, I can see that. Dave Potter says, Niall, we need to stop listening to our governments. People of nations don't go to war. Governments send people to war. If they want to go to war, I say we send the politicians. I'm all with that one, Dave. And you notice it. I'll bet you there's not a lot of Russians who want to be warring with Ukraine. But why can they allow their government then to do it for them? If they don't want war, why do they allow their government to survive? Because overthrowing your government is a big thing. Taking that kind of stance is big. Let's see. Niles says, God has always had his reasons. I look at it like, what would I do in that position? Yeah, it's the same question. What would we do in the position of our government fighting wars we don't want to be in? Well, we do have protest. Matt Finn says that's not an excuse. Christ taught that bro, don't conflate. Christ taught that, bro. Don't conflate old with new. Talking about Old and New Testaments? Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Ananias and Sapphira, says Matthew Sainsbury in the book of Acts. Can get scary as a New Testament grace content. You remember who Ananias and Sapphira were? Everybody came to pledge money to the new burgeoning church. And Ananias and Sapphira held back some of the sum. They sold some land or something, and they held back a portion of that and gave a portion to God. And They were prophetically found out that they did this and struck dead for lying to the Holy Spirit, or something that they called it. To me, if God owns, as the old song said, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, the wealth in every mine. He owns the rivers and the rocks and rills, the sun and moon that shine. God owns everything. And he expects integrity of heart. What if he doesn't get it? He'll strike you dead, according to Ananias and Sapphira. That's a horror story. These are people were asked to give, and they gave. And did they do it out of greediness? The Bible doesn't really say they were being greedy, but it says they withheld a portion of what they sold of their property and then gave the rest to the church. And they were struck dead for this. Were they struck dead by, here's the question, was it by God or was it by Peter, who had the ability to do that? Who was given powerful abilities? That's an interesting question. The whole Ananias and Sapphira story. So, did God say that, or were we told by men? Well, there it is. That's the question, kind of what I asked. Did God say that, or were we told by men that he said that? That is the big raging question I have about things. Those are the things, Matt Finn, you know me, I'm not being argumentative at all, against you in particular at all. I respect your input. I have had a lot of questions raise up around that very question that Dave just said. Did God say that, or did men say that God said that? That's a faith issue then. And I was just talking about faith to my kids just yesterday. Who was asking me? It was Rowan, very curiously, asking me about faith and stuff. And I said, well, I said, faith is putting your belief in something that you have no proof of. The proof is your heart. The proof is what you believe. Your belief and level of belief is the proof of the thing that you're putting your belief in. I said, there's a big difference between, it's not the way I said it. I said, what has always bothered me about God, when I think about God, there's all these things he wants to give us, that he wants us to have. We're his creation, his children. He doesn't want us to go screaming off into an eternity, an infinity without him in hell or whatever place that is. Yet, it seems like God doesn't go out of his way to prove that those things are real, or that even he is real. It's all such things of such great, infinite importance, yet they're left to us, the finite minds of humans, to determine whether or not we want to believe it. And that belief will determine which direction we go, basically, theologically speaking. That's disturbing to me. And I don't understand that about God. 4 a.m., Dave Potter says. So, thanks, Sean Stroik. I'm the quiet one listening in the background tonight. Good to have you here, Sean. I'm glad you're here, brother. Let's see what else we got. Niall, good job, Scotty. Your call where you want to go. This is where the bad boys gather. There you go. We're the bad boys of theology. I'm a theological bad boy. That's we could make a whole show about that stuff. Guys, if you can't figure out how to plug my show in, what category to put it in, it's because I deliberately spread this stuff all throughout. And I hit lots of different topics along the way. I could be a theological bad boy if I wanted and just totally always focus on that. But I don't believe all of that either. there are certain things that I have to talk about, I have to air, and I have to figure them out. So, and you know what? When I was in ministry in the church, I had it all figured out. My world was very small because I had it all figured out. I knew the answers to everything in the most humble, modest way that I could. You didn't go, I know everything. It wasn't that. It was that I know I know what my answer should be theologically. And I've got everything in the universe is figured out. That's the way it was back then. So, anyway, Matthew Sainsbury says Putin is dragging the Russian economy in the mud. That's very true. He just committed atrocities in Ukraine. Yep. Niall Parkinson says Ukraine and Russia, massive propaganda, both sides. Terrible messages from both sides. I agree with that, actually. God is not alone, says Niall. Fear and guilt control matrix, says Michelle Canham Free. I know where that comes from, that particular phraseology. Maybe you got it from somewhere else, but this is like I mentioned last night. I sometimes hear certain phrases that remind me of somebody, and their actions have soiled me on anything else they say or do. So I hear that, and I go, yeah, I know where that came from. And I would say it a different way. Sorry. And that's the way I very rarely like that. But if you cross a certain line with me and you make no attempt to make your wrongdoing right, you don't at least come that inch so I can go the rest of the mile for you. I got a problem with anything that comes out of your mouth. Not you, Michelle. Just the source of that. So, hell is the most scariest topic Christians use. I agree with you, Matthew Sainsbury. Brianna says same. I'm not sure what you said that to, Brianna. Somebody in the chat room or something I said, because I'm looking back on these comments probably a couple of minutes after they were made. Matt says, I see it as the signs are there and you can connect the dots when you truly study the word, including expanded understanding of the apocryphal books. I agree with you, Matt Finn. Everything is there. The dots are there to connect. The bigger question I have underlying that question is why would God make something that's so important to connect the dots on a game of connecting the dots? God is, according to God, all-powerful, omniscient, omnipresent. What are all the omnis that you can put on God? A God of unlimited power and majesty. The God who controls the universe. The God who holds the atom together. Yet this is the God who has the power to do anything he wants to do, except connect the dots for you. And if you're not a believer in him, sometimes finding him is the most foreign thing to ever come along. And you would ask, why should I believe in that God? That's like Pharaoh. They said in Moses that Pharaoh continued to harden his heart with the message that Moses brought after each and every plague. Is that because Pharaoh was just a dumbass? I ain't going to believe in your God. Hand me another beer. Is that what Pharaoh was? What was his first question to Moses? And I always think of Yul Brynner. Who is your God that I should believe him? And now your work is doubled. Thank you. Good night. Good night. I'm here every day from noon to 3. Pharaoh, sun god, servant of Ra, eye of Horus, God on earth. Who's your God? I should let you go to worship him in the desert. Fuck off, is basically what Pharaoh said. Yet we see it as, it's this hardening of his heart against God. I even heard one guy say, his hardening of his heart against Jesus Christ. And I thought, Jesus didn't exist yet. But that's the mode we got into theologically. So, and those are the questions I make fun of it because it's fun to talk about it that way. I need to have some people on this show perhaps call in and we can work off of each other. A little bit, we'll play off of each other. We'll have a debate. We'll talk about it. But that's what I think about God sometimes. You've got the ability to take away all question for people. Why is that a bad thing theologically? Oh, well, then you wouldn't have to have any faith. I don't care. There's lots of things in my life I want to not have to operate out of faith over. I don't want to have to operate out of faith that, think of things. What are the things that you don't want to have to live your life in? Big things in life that you have to operate out of faith over. I mean, not just faith that a thing might happen, but that the thing even exists. I don't want to have to operate by faith for anything that is important. Especially God, an eternal destination. That's a tough one. I'd love to ask God someday why he did it that way. So why'd you do this thing this way? Oh, one could have come back from the dead, said Paul, and they still would not believe. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about sending me signs that God is real. If God wants us to worship him and be like him and spend eternity with him, why would he leave that up to me guessing whether or not I should put my faith in him when I don't really know that he's there? What's he going to do? How is God evident? We say he's evident in the hearts of men. He's evident in the things that we do, things that we see. Is that not just the human spirit, however? That same spirit that can do those good things to other humans, can they not craft a God to match that? The etiology, if you will, of why we humans act the way we do. And folks, I'm just asking questions. That's all I'm doing. I'm just asking questions. Let's see. Iowa said Russia's now back on the gold standard. 5,000 rubles, 1 gram of gold, just like the libertarians want. Bing, bang, boom. Niall says if you look at God as a philosophical experiment on his behalf, belief makes sense. After all, we have no idea how much time God has on his hands. That's very true. And speaking of that, I think God probably exists outside of time. Something I thought years and years ago, 30 years ago, when I was doing some writing, or I don't know what I was doing that I was, but I said, perhaps God, I was more into the Bible. I was more into teaching it and learning it. I was in ministry. And I said 30 years ago, and I said, what if God exists outside of linear time? Now, this has been brought up many times before. Since, for me, this was a stumbled upon discovery. I said, what if time is like when God created the universe, he created time and contained it in a bubble. Let's call it a globe on God's desk. There's time. There's the universe. There's everything that is that we know. And God, though, exists outside of that bubble. He's outside linear time. He's outside the globe of creation that he has made. And I didn't mean this to be flippant, but I said all of God's creation, everything we know and can see and experience is in a globe on God's desk. Well, where's God's desk? It's not in that globe. It's somewhere else. So there you go. Matthew Finn says something very important here. If you're unwilling to spend the time finding him, God, then he has no time for you. Would you stick around with a group of friends that ignore you? I understand that point. A counterpoint I would use for that is to say, if you had somebody that said they loved you and they loved you so much that they wanted to see everything good for you, that they wanted to be there for you, that they loved you with all their heart, and they want you to love them back. And they want to give you a place to live for all eternity with them. Yet your whole life, you never see them face to face. They never take the time to darken your door physically. They never meet you on the realm that you were created in. All they give you is they say, I'm not even writing you a new letter. You got to go back and find this love letter I wrote to millions of people thousands of years ago. That's where you'll find out about it. So, like you use the example, if you're unwilling to spend time finding God, then he has no time for you. Would you stick around with a group of friends that ignore you? And I would say the converse to that. Is God willing to expend some of the majesty that he possesses to make himself known to humans on that one-on-one basis? That basis, it says, it's not just words written in a book thousands of years ago. It's now, it's real. I am here. And wouldn't humans be in the right to say, if you're not willing to show me that, other than in an ancient book, why on earth should I stick around for you? Because I don't even know that you exist. So there's the two sides of that coin is all I'm getting at, Matt Finn. That's the rough part. Now, I'm not saying I don't believe. I have my beliefs, but I also have my legitimate questions. Brianna's just hiding in the shadows, just listening. It's great to have you here, Brianna. And you can go on and on with this. Dave Potter says, Iowa X. Dick Van Dyke and Mel Brooks will outlast Biden, but Putin will be put down by one of his own. Probably. Let's see. What else have we got? Yeah, the faith chapter in Hebrews 11. By faith, so-and-so did this and so did that. By faith, they did this. By faith, they did that. Yeah, that's the faith that you're acting in faith. By faith, they believed that God was there. I get that. I understand that part. Let's see. You're betting an 800 kiloton airburst over your house, says Iowa X. You have to take something you have no proof of, but believe completely with a pinch of salt and some humor, says Niall Parkinson. Yeah, Iowa X, you got that right. He said, Dave, the bad news is that Putin is a moderate. The next guy is going to be younger and meaner. Yeah, I see that. Or it all depends on who they allow into power. Russia's had its revolutions in the past. Can certainly do it again. Who do they allow in power? Do they allow the young brash guy? But then do all the armies and all the police would have to support this guy? Why does the one guy or that ruling oligarchy have the power over everything and everybody? The people revolted. It's people are afraid to die. Even people of faith are afraid to die. Now, there are some things you would die for. You'd do it if you had to. Not that you want to. Sometimes you might be put in a position where you have to make that choice. So, or that's right, Matthew Sainsbury, the Bolshevik Revolution, 1917. That's right. I tell you what, Scotty, this is Matthew Sainsbury. One time, me and Dad were singing some praise songs. Both of us felt a comforting presence. Since that occurred to him, I have some questions at times about God. And I get that. We can get those comforting feelings from those things. I do. Sometimes I'll sing songs to my kids. I'll read things. I watched a little ad. What is the it's either a mini series or it's a series of movies, I think, on Jesus, the life of Jesus. One of the more modern ones that's done in the last couple of years. And I keep seeing the ads. Is it The Chosen? Is that the one? There was one that was making the rounds last week or the week before, and it shows Jesus coming to the guy at the pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem. And this is the pool where people who were sick or crippled or needed healing, they would go to this pool in Jerusalem. And, excuse me, when they would see the waters stir, it meant an angel was there and had settled into the waters. And the first person who could roll themselves into those waters would be healed of whatever affliction they were suffering. Now, I don't know if they had examples of people actually being healed, if this was once a miraculous place. But I remember Jesus in this clip. It shows me he's meeting this guy who couldn't walk and couldn't walk from the time of his birth. And Jesus came and started questioning him. Matt Finn, yeah, The Chosen. And I saw that clip. Man, that was heart moving. Was that because God was speaking to me through that, which God does? He'll speak to us through weird stuff sometimes. A song, a commercial on TV. God will speak to us the way he wants to speak to us. I've always believed that about God. But here you got this little clip from this thing. It was a 3-4 minute clip from this series. And it was very much in line with... Now, when I watch a Bible film, something film, Dave, you'll appreciate this. You're a movie producer. If you didn't know that about Uncle Dave, by the way, folks, Uncle Dave is an old Hollywood guy, movie producer. But so you'll appreciate this, Dave. When I see a story about Jesus or a story about God, I want to see it produced well, especially if it's historical. If it looks to me like they're wearing cleanly, neatly pressed robes and stuff like that, they lose me because it's not the reality. I want to see it as real life. I kind of liked that about The Chosen, the clips I've seen over the last couple of years. I've seen a couple of clips from that. It's free and you can download it. And I'll tell you something. I'm afraid to watch it because I'll probably cry. That's just the way I am. I get a little teary just saying that. I might cry. Why would I cry over that? Because it taps into things that I once believed very strongly. Those things never go away. That's a good question, and I want to, Niall, I want to hit that in a second here. But so we'll come back to it. What are your thoughts on hope? Asked Niall. I ask it because I've been asked for the 5th time to appear on a certain channel. So about hope, what are all of our thoughts on hope? What did the Apostle Paul said about faith? Faith is the substance of things unseen. There was the unseen and hope. It's the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, or the other way around. The substance of things not seen, the evidence of things hoped for. Hope. Hope is a faith thing. I know when I said it just last week to somebody, Paul in the New Testament said about death of loved ones. He said, "We sorrow not as those who have no hope." What's the hope? The hope is that we will see them again. In heaven is the obvious there. or other faiths would call it Nirvana, or Niflheim, or wherever, Valhalla, the happy hunting grounds, all of these places. So, the Holy Mountain, watch that, and you'll be done with religious films. Oh, I think I know which one you're talking about. I haven't seen that, but I think I know what you're talking about, Iowa X. I agree. Make it as educational and historical as possible. That's right. You can have a wonderful, beautiful message of hope and faith. But if the trappings it's placed into are off historically, it steals it from me. I know this is, I'm just shifting off of the question that Niall asked about hope. But when I watch, say, a movie about the Exodus, about Moses, I look at the Charlton Heston Yule Brynner Technicolor extravaganza from the late 1950s. Amazing film, but not for its historical accuracy. Not for actually very much accuracy at all. Maybe the look and the feel, but it's told as a story. And you look at that Technicolor, that deep, you know what that's like, the Technicolor. It's that when you see well done Technicolor, where you see it displayed well. I saw the 10 Commandments at Uncle Dave. You'll remember this place in Minneapolis, out just as you go just west of Highway 100, over by the Masonic Lodge where you and I painted all the murals. Right up Highway 12 there used to be the old Cooper Theater. It was a big round orange building built in the 50s, I think it was. And it still had the old CinemaScope screen on it. And one time the Cooper, they showed some of the old movies there. There was this phase they were going through. They were to take old movies like the 10 Commandments and show them in their original form on those big screens. And the original, I don't know what prints they had of it or what they did, but a Technicolor version of the film, which is so unlike what you would see on television. Dave says, I saw 2001 The Space Odyssey there when it opened. I saw it at the Brooklyn Center Theater, which is now a bank. I remember when that's how old I am. That new theater up by Brookdale Mall, which is out where I lived. That was a brand new theater when I was a kid, 9, 10 years old. Now it's a bank. So, yeah, we watched it, Iowa X, the same way. Every Easter on TV. VistaVision, 70 millimeter prints. There it is. And so the beauty of that was what overtook for me the fact that it was archaeologically, historically, and anthropologically a bunch of hooey. It was a beautiful story told beautifully. That's what Cecil B. DeMille did with that film. He gave us what a treasure that film is. This rich, beautiful, textured story put together beautifully. But it wasn't historically accurate. So when I remember a few years ago when Ridley Scott came out with Exodus, Gods and Kings, with, God, what the heck's his name? Batman playing Moses. Why can't I think of his name? See him in my head. His name's on the tip of my tongue. Exodus, Gods and Kings. And I was so anticipating that movie. Iowa, you could see the Blues Brothers as a religious film. We're on a mission from God. The band. And so Exodus, Gods and Kings, I thought, what a wonderful opportunity. I thought, oh, Ridley Scott. I love what Ridley Scott does. I love his filmmaking. I thought he was going to make an exquisite picture about the Exodus. And it was good in its own respect. But it was just a weird remake of the Ten Commandments from the 1950s. And I thought, wow, I had heard originally Spielberg was going to be part of making that movie, and he dropped out of it. There were a couple of other big names, and I thought that was going to be cool. Then Ridley Scott was picked up to do it, but he was doing it in between films, and he got it done. And I think it had this feel of you're just falling back on the old tropes of the Bible story about Moses. Hey, Matt, good night. Which Matt are we saying good night to? Matt Finn, are you on your way out? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fun discussion. I hope you have a great evening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow night. Yes, sir, Master Finn, you have a good evening. Glad that you were here tonight. Good to have a discussion with you here. So, Exodus, Gods, and Kings. I actually wrote an article about, it was my, I'm going to get you a link. It's my take on Exodus, Gods, and Kings. And I wrote what I thought was a pretty cool article about it. Where are we? Boom. My profile. Well, they've changed some of these sites around so much. I entitled it Exodus, looking pretty, but dumb as a rock. And copy link. No, not to highlights. Let's just open that up. I'm going to share the link with you over in the chat room. If you like to read and you want to read something kind of fun, this was my take on this movie. Looking pretty, but dumb as a rock. It bothered me that he followed the motif that he followed. Ridley Scott. There you go. There's the link. I just posted it into the chat room. I think I did. It's spinning. There it is. If you go to that link, you can read that article. It's a rather long article. And I go into my theories at the same time. But I think there's so much truth and so much amazing history there. It's like watching the movie Elizabeth with Kate. See, I'm just going blank. I wanted to say Capshaw. That's not right. She was in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and she married Spielberg. Kate Capshaw. Kate. God, she played Galadriel in the Lord of the Rings movies. She's been in so many different movies, and why can't I think of her last name? Probably because I don't say it every day. But brain fart, says Brianna. Ain't that the truth? I have more of those lately. And I'll tell you this. I had a huge low blood sugar today. And when I get low blood sugar, I usually feel it. I'll feel like it's like a fluttering. I feel it here in my chest and my stomach. And it's like, it's not a pain. It's nothing like that, but it's like, and then I can start sweating. And then what comes after that? A bit of delirium. I've never lost touch yet, but there are times where today was a bad one. It was just like, and it's not like, oh, I have a seizure or something like that. It's nothing like that. It's like my blood sugar drops too low and I got to pop something in my mouth that's got sugar on it. Please, no bad jokes. And so I was cooking dinner. So, well, it was before that. It happened earlier in the day. And I came down here and I could feel it. And I took my blood meter kit and I took my blood sugar and I was at 65, which isn't super low. But you go from, it's usually 70 to 120 is what they deem to be a good range for your blood sugar. So I was below the low end and I could feel it. And so I put I put protein and sugar. I took a spoonful of peanut butter and put it in my mouth. And that usually works. What are you eating, honey? I'm just eating a peanut bar. And so I was fine. And then an hour or two later, I'm up in the kitchen. I'm making dinner. I got food. I've been chopping vegetables, green peppers, onions, tomatoes, all this, and I'm making a glaze with that a bit, and I'm adding the meat. And I've got Ellery there. We're trying to figure out how to make the dough. I was gonna make little pies, little tiny pies about that size, with this mixture inside. Then you fold it, crimp the edges, fry them for a minute, and then stick them into the oven for 20 minutes. And that was going to be dinner tonight. And so I'm in the middle of frying meat. The meat's not even done yet, and I'm all of a sudden I'm just profusely sweating, and I'm shaking like this almost. And I'm like, uh-oh. I said, I got this low blood sugar again. What the heck is going on today? And it hit me in a way that sometimes it'll hit me and I can't think straight. I've had it wake me up in the middle of the night, because it wakes you up if you feel it. And I get up and I go make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or something in the middle of the night, mostly because you can't think of what to eat or what to do. My doc said, just eat a piece of fruit. Sometimes eating a piece of fruit requires me to peel it. And it's like, I can't peel anything right now. But I was cooking it. I felt like I was going to fall over. But there's that thing that's inside you. Randy's like, are you okay? Are you going to be okay? No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'll be good. I just got to get some peanut butter or something. And I can't articulate. I'm ready. I'm going to fall over. This is going to overtake me. And, but I made it and it was fine. And, and it has the residual effect of making you feel tired. I don't know what brought that all up, but man, I had that low blood sugar today, and I lost all sense of, not all sense, because I survived it just fine. But Rainey's very good about it, and she takes good care of me if that happens. But she made sure I was doing okay. If you can't handle it, I'll jump right in, is kind of her thing. And I'm like, I'm handling it. I'm good. And I really wasn't. And there was a reason I brought that up. And now, in telling the details of the story, I forgot why I was telling it. But banana will work, says Field Guy. Yep. Happened to Brianna at work today. You have low blood sugar today? And Field Guy, you must get that too. If you know a banana will take care of it. Dave, moving swiftly into a different topic, Dave says, I don't believe that they're crazy enough to use them. You've got to be talking about nuclear weapons. I think China could do the deed without nukes. And if it took out the government and moved quickly, the people weakened by all of this would yield. You're probably right. Like high blood pressure makes you stupid? Yeah. I got high blood pressure too. It's one of the things I have to take meds for now that I'm old and decrepit. Dave says, I think the West, and by that I mean everyone west of Russia, would sit it out. Yeah. Iowa says, Dave, put down the Tom Clancy books. War is never that easy. Yeah, it's not. That's very true. I get that. You know what I hail back to in war and being overpowered? And of course, we fight wars differently now. But I remember reading the Leon Uris book, Uris, Uris, wrote Mila 18, amongst many of his other books. Exodus was one of his books that they made the movie with Paul Newman in it, about the founding of the state of Israel. He wrote that book. And but Mila 18 was about the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. And the first book I ever read that made me cry. I thought, book can't make me cry. Only a movie could. And this was back in like the early 1980s when I read that novel. Small novel, Mila 18. about the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto. That Iowa X might be what you're talking about. War is never that easy. And it's always complicated, and there's always complications in people. So let's see. What else? Let's move on here. The new comments. We've already been going 40 minutes since the end of the show. We won't go much longer, folks. YouTube war news is propaganda. Ain't that the truth? We're very censored. Many veterans with channels get paid by Mil Intel to make propaganda. Yep, military intel. Yeah, I get that. So I was kind of a little excited to see that Elon Musk bought the majority, he's the majority shareholder in Twitter. They're trying to bring about some changes because he's tired of the censorship. Well, there's probably other reasons too. He's got business reasons for doing it too, I'm sure. There's that. Michelle Cannon Free is still here. Good to see you. Brianna Learman off to bed. Good night. 5 a.m. is going to come quick. You have a good sleep. And hope to see you guys soon. Good night. Glad you were here tonight. I have the high blood pressure, says IOX. Have to be careful to not see red. Yeah, I'm sure. And mine's high, and I'm on the meds for it and all that, which I never thought I would have to be. Maybe that's where that conversation started. But I get awfully tired of giving myself shots every day, a couple of times a day, of taking so many pills every morning. I feel like a walking medicine chest. This is all for my survival, so I don't die. And I get that. So like I say, it would be nice to go live with some Aboriginal tribe for 6 months and come out medicine free. Wouldn't that be nice? Is it even possible? Whenever someone says to me, I love Jesus, I always ask, can you be more specific? Exactly now. Can you be a little more specific with that? So good conversation though tonight, guys. More to come. Tomorrow we're going to talk, maybe try to wrap up this. What is it, Tuesday or Wednesday today? It's Tuesday. We'll try to wrap up the scary stories bit. And unless it carries us into another night. Organic here. We'll do what works and what feels good. And sometimes it doesn't always feel good and sometimes it doesn't always work. But for the most part, hopefully this works for you all. I appreciate the fact that there's a bunch of you that stick around here every night for the Nothing Show. The Captain's Cabin. The Captain's Cabin. The cabin boy. The cabin boy. That silly little nipper. And I won't take that any further. Niall Parkinson says, lesson here. More of audience for the after show. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Well, it always comes in. The numbers never quite show accurately. You're not going to see during the show who actually watches this. You look at the numbers of this show after the show when you go back to the YouTube channel, and you'll see. Like when I was with Odyssey in its other incarnation, I was told we were getting about 5,000-6,000 viewers per night. But that was also through Odyssey Radio. So I don't know. I haven't even gotten a report yet and not looking for one yet since we relaunched this show. We've been 3 weeks doing this show again now. I'll wait a while. We'll see how it goes. See how it grows. And I don't care about growth so long as it's satisfying to everybody and I can continue to do it. All growth means for me is if I could draw income off this show, that'd be fabulous. And I wouldn't worry about taking the time to do it. So it would become a thing. It would become a vocational as opposed to a hobby. And I hope this comes across as more than a hobby for me. But I'm trying to build it into something that will be a little more than a hobby, so I can make it as good as I can for everybody. So, thank you, Niall. I appreciate that very much. That means a lot to me. From the heart. All right, guys. Let's get out of here. Let's call it a night. And I will see you all tomorrow night. Pending any mishap or being bombed by Russia, which I don't think will happen tonight. So, all right, you guys, you have a good night. And you know what? Live long and prosper and all of that. You know how that goes. This is the Captain's Cabin tuning out. Good night.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.